That's me. I'm Ellie. Don't feel bad. It's okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Headley.
And my name is Maeve Gainey. Welcome to Life on Film, a presentation of the National March for Life in Canada. Tonight's feature is the third episode of Choice42's exposed video series titled It's Okay. We have the great pleasure of interviewing Laura Klassen of Choice42. Laura, thank you so much for joining us here today. But before we jump into the interview, let's roll the clip.
That's me. I'm Ellie. Don't feel bad. It's okay. It was a long time ago. 1962. I just thought maybe you don't know about me. My parents didn't want me anyway. The doctors worked with scientists, and they took my organs out as soon as I was aborted. It had to be done right away because the organs need to be fresh. It's okay. It wasn't just me. There were 32 of us. They sent our organs to the United States for the experiment. It was my lung they ended up using. Fetal cell line WI38. 38 because that's how much experiments they did on us. Fetal cell lines are used for all kinds of things, like vaccines. Mine was used to make MMR. You probably gave that one to your baby. I was one of the first fetal cell lines, but there's lots more from lots more babies. It's okay. I just thought maybe you haven't heard of us.
Hello, I'm David. I was killed a few years after Ellie. It's okay. The doctor said my mom had psychiatric reasons to not want me. My lung made MRC5. 5 because it took 5 babies. Perhaps you had my shots? Rabies, polio, chickenpox.
Heck, 293 came from me. I'm Joanna. Did you hear about me? They used my cell line just now for the COVID vaccines. Heck, human embryonic kidney. But I wasn't an embryo. I was 3 months gestation. It's okay. No one knows how many babies it took for Heck 293, but there was 293 experiments, so it was a lot of babies. And no pain medication. That was ruining the cells. It's okay.
I'm Jordan. They used my cell line to help with the COVID vaccines as well.
Percy 6. They took my eyes. It's okay. I'm Bo. In 2015, China tried something new for me and 8 other babies. It's called water bag abortion. To keep us alive as long as possible so the organs will be fresh. My lung made the Wolvax 2 cell line. I'm not going to be the last one though. There's going to be more after me. And me. And me. And me. And me. It's okay. It's okay. We just thought you ought to know.
Experiments were being performed on near-term alive aborted babies who were not even afforded the mercy of anesthetic as they writhed and cried in agony. And when their usefulness had expired, they were executed and discarded as garbage.
It's okay.
Welcome back, everyone. Wow, this video is absolutely heartbreaking. Hearing the voices of these children really brings out the humanity in each of them. Their stories make it impossible to ignore the reality behind fetal research. I think even a lot of people who are pro-life and know a bit about embryonic stem cell research don't realize just how many preborn children lost their lives specifically for their organs, or how their organs needed to be harvested immediately to keep them fresh. It's really easy for people to just assume that this is somehow a byproduct of abortion, a tragic discovery of a life that was already. As this video shows, that's really not the case. The reality is that the lives of these children were deliberately ended for this purpose. Knowing that just makes it so much more difficult to process.
Yeah, and I think this video is so powerful because it's both eye-opening and very emotional in a lot of ways. And it gives these children a voice in a way that statistics or reports just can't. I'm super grateful for this piece, and I think it probably took a lot of courage to make as well, especially knowing how difficult this topic is for so many people, considering the widespread implementation and availability of various medical interventions and vaccinations, things along those lines that have used fetal cell lines in the production. And it's a conversation that we do need to have, as painful as it may be. So thank you for creating this, Laura. And it moves all of us and reminds us of the cost behind some of these scientific advances that do truly impact everyone. So now with that impact fresh in our minds, I do want to start diving into our questions for you this evening. So my first question is, what exactly inspired you to tell these stories in this way, using the voices of children to narrate?
Right. Yeah. Well, like you said, it is emotional. It's very factual, and all of our information to back everything up, all of our sources is available on our website on the page that goes with it. But I did want to make it really emotional because that is the piece that's missing from the conversation. And yeah, I really wanted to humanize these tiny little people, and what better way to do it than to give them little people voices. And yeah, I think that our 5 little actors just like absolutely knocked it out of the park. I'm so thankful to them.
They really did an amazing job. But I don't understand why embryonic stem cells are even used when we already have ethical alternatives like adult stem cells that have actually yielded dozens of real cures and treatments, while embryonic stem cell research, despite all the ethical concerns, haven't produced a single cure that I know of. Given this, what do you think it would take to shift the medical industry's focus from fetal cell lines to something like adult cell lines or another ethical alternative?
Right. Well, it's interesting. Yeah, because I did focus the whole video on vaccines, but like you mentioned, there are so many other things in the medical world that use the fetal cell lines. But for vaccines, some of the first vaccines, they didn't have fetal cell lines. They did use animal cell lines, right? Like for the first polio vaccine that came out. And then they switched over. And they switched over because it's just easier to use. You're trying to make a vaccine for a human. It's easier to use human tissue, right? And because of the age of the human being, they're so young, their cells are replicating so quickly, and everything is so healthy. And so it is easier to use. And so I see why they changed over, but it's not okay, right? Like there are certain standards that we need to stick to, and just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? So I don't know what it will take. The medical world is super interesting because they know, right? Like if you go to buy these fetal cell lines online, and I included links on our website too, where you can buy these fetal cell lines. And if you look at those pages, they say this came from a 3-month-old female Caucasian lung. It's all right there. So they know, right? Like by the time they're buying it and they're working with it in the lab, they're aware. But it's just, it doesn't seem like any of them are questioning it or wanting to dig a little deeper to figure this out. So maybe it will come from inside of the medical community. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll get, Christians can like swarm the medical profession and make a difference. Or maybe it'll be just the public saying, hey, I'm not willing to benefit from, babies who are harvested alive. And so I'm not going to partake in this vaccine or in this other medical advancement, which is a really hard thing to do. But something hard has to happen before this is changed, I think.
Yeah, and I think we see that across the medical field in a lot of different areas, even when it comes to, treatments for ectopic pregnancy, where more often than not, doctors desire to find an easier solution to various medical ailments that require unethical solutions than to resort to ethical solutions that are more taxing on a woman's body. For example, in the case of ectopic pregnancy, like a self-indectomy, as opposed to actually ending the life of the embryo that's developing in the woman's fallopian tube, for example. So I think there's a lot of examples where doctors and other medical professionals choose the unethical option because it seems to be the status quo and the easiest way to go about things.
And the cheaper way.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's unfortunate that that's the state of our medical system, that we opt for an easier alternative than an ethical alternative. So I agree. And I think if as a movement, we begin talking about this more and actually using our, actually making informed choices when it comes to our own healthcare to avoid those unethical practices, will eventually make a difference. And by lobbying, medical groups and the government and various policies, I think that will make a lot of change. So I think this is a great video to kind of start that conversation. And because it's so emotional, I think it really pulls people in. So you did mention a little bit about the transparency of being able to access this information about fetal cell lines in terms of, going onto a website, being able to potentially purchase them and having it very clearly laid out that it, it provides information about the fetus that the cell line was harvested from. I'm curious to know, when it came to the production of this video, how difficult was it to actually find information about these cell lines and about the children who these cell lines came from?
You know what? It was very difficult. And I would say about 10-ish years ago, I looked into vaccines, not to do anything to do with fetal cell lines, just to look into vaccines and kind of what they're doing to children. And I did not find the information that I was able to find this time around. But it was very hidden. But once I got in, once I found one thing and then just kept going from there, and once I connected with the right people, specifically, there's a Christian science guy in the UK named Christian Hacking with Center for Bioethical Reform UK. And he is amazing. He is such an amazing researcher. And once I connected with him, he was then able to introduce me to all of these other people who have been looking into it, who have published articles. And these are articles which I could not find when I was just Googling for these things. And so I do feel like it was being blocked. But now I was able to break through that myself finally and get access to all of this. So it's really interesting too, especially with the Chinese cell line that we covered, Wolbach's 2, because I had all of these sources and links and everything and articles and had it all listed. And then right before we were about to publish and I was gathering together all the sources, all of them were gone. They're scrubbed from the internet. And I thought that was really interesting. And of course, China's not going to want this information out there, but they were gone. But I have screenshots, I'm like, did I imagine this? And I was able to find some other things, but they definitely did. Things have been removed, even from the time of me researching to putting the video out. Huge. Most of the Chinese stuff is gone. So it's very interesting. And of course, like, the government and the medical world doesn't want people to know about this. They like the way things are going. They like their constant supply of dead babies to, for all of their research. They like this. They don't want the ethical version.
Yeah. Yeah, it does feel like we're often lied to about information that's available. And speaking of wall vax too, some pro-lifers argue that since the original fetal cell lines were harvested decades ago, it no longer matters. But given recent cases like Baby Bo, Wallvax2, who we know was killed as recently as 2015 to replace depleting cell lines of WI38 and MRC5 cell lines, how would you respond to those that believe that this issue is just in the past?
Right. So that's the thing, right? The big lie that I heard when I started looking into this and talking to people about it is that, it was just one baby in the 60s. And no, it wasn't. Of what we have recorded, and there's no way we have everything recorded, but hundreds of babies, probably more, harvested. And especially for the rubella vaccine, the amount of babies throughout that journey to get that vaccine is huge. It's so sad. So for little Ellie there, WI38, that's usually who they're talking about when they say it was one baby in the 60s, because she was harvested in 62. But she was one of, I think it was 32 babies who were harvested just for that particular experiment. So each of these children represents many, many, many. And like you say, it didn't stop. And so, as we go through these 5 children, the dates are chugging along. You've got little Jordan harvested in 85, and then his cells were used in 95. Like, this is during some of our lifetime. This has been happening. And then, yes, 2015 with China. And what's interesting about that is, I think China just got sick and tired of having to use cell lines from other countries, right? It's expensive to buy them. Whoever's selling these is making a ton of money. And so, if you go on there and look to see how much it costs to buy a little vial of the fetal cell line, it's a lot of money. So they want to just make their own so that they can, so they can now sell it to other people, but so that they can just be using their own. So this is 2015. It hasn't stopped. And the other thing kind of along that argument, they say that the cell lines are immortal. And so that is why that was the one baby in the 60s. And then now that we have her immortal cell line, people are just using that over and over and over. That's not true. So WI31 is actually not even classified as immortal. It's not even considered that by the scientists and doctors themselves, because it is depleting. And this is what's leading to more newer cell lines being created. Now, HEC293 and PER-C6, which are 2 of the cell lines that were used for the COVID vaccines, so, very recent use, they will say that those cell lines are immortal, just because there's so much material to work with, and the cell lines double, and you're able to make more, and you're able to have this huge amount available. But the thing is, HEC293 has imperfections. So scientists are motivated to still try and find a perfect cell line, right? So this is ongoing research. It has not stopped. It was not one baby in the 60s. This is on us now to realize and figure out and find a moral solution.
Yeah, I actually wasn't aware that some of those cell lines, I know I've heard of the concept of them being considered immortal, but I didn't realize that that wasn't the case. So that is interesting. So it sounds like there is a constant demand for more fetal cell lines, which is part of the ethical issue with them. And so I am curious from your perspective, why do some pro-life people seem hesitant to engage with the topic of fetal cell lines, specifically in vaccines? And what do you say to encourage pro-lifers to take a stand on this issue?
Well, ultimately, what it comes down to is that they're selfish, which is harsh, but there you go. So if you're actually against abortion and you are pro-life and you believe that all human beings are equal, no matter their size, then this is not okay. You have to understand that it's not okay. The reason why I think so many people are being selfish regarding this is because they're scared. And there's been so much propaganda, like we've seen over the last few years with COVID, and people were forced to get it. The government will say now, no, they weren't. No one was forced. But, you know, when your job was on the line, if you didn't get it, you were backed right into a corner, and people got it. And so I understand because they're scared. But the whole other side of this, which I don't think I've ever really talked about it, but the more research I do into this, I do believe that the current day vaccines are actually a curse on our culture, because I do think that there's a lot of harmful toxins within them, right? Okay. The fetus aside, there's a lot of poisons. It's just a fact. If you look at the actual ingredients of vaccines. So I think that people they're so blinded by the propaganda and by being scared that they're not actually into it. And I don't have all the answers on that. I don't have the perfect solution, right? But there's a lot of really interesting information, even historically. If you go and look at, example, polio, right? How did polio actually end? Was it actually a vaccine that saved people? Did they maybe inject and cause polio for many, many, many people with the vaccines? There's a lot of information out there. So I'm just saying, like, don't just believe. Not only is it an ethical issue, beyond that, it's actually possibly maybe damaging people. Yeah.
So the pandemic really seemed to open people's eyes to this issue, especially since for most of us, this was the first time that we had to make our own decision about vaccines, whereas before, that choice was often made by our parents. I'll be honest, I didn't know much about embryonic stem cell research until I came across your video on modern child sacrifice, which I didn't even see until after the COVID vaccines were already out. Have you noticed a shift in the pro-life community's stance on this issue since the pandemic brought so much attention to fetal cell lines used in vaccine development?
Yes. Which is really good and encouraging. And I think just because of the way, I mean, I don't know the official position of Campaign Life or the official position of either of you on vaccines in general. So not to be insulting or anything, but I think that people, how the COVID vaccine played out, and they saw things, and they were able to evaluate that against what the news was telling us. And I think a lot of people realized that maybe this COVID vaccine wasn't quite the savior of humanity that it was made out to be. So I think just that in and of itself caused people to start questioning more and more things. And it is a really interesting thing that what you just said about how it was our decision, because exactly, we were vaccinated. Our parents vaccinated us. You don't have a choice when you're a kid. You go, you get it. But now it is on us, and it is something that we really need to be looking into. And yeah, I am very encouraged to see just kind of the blinders come off a bit, and people starting to think for themselves and not just blindly trust what they're being told. So that is good.
Yeah. So I am wondering, I guess, in terms of next steps. So now that we're starting to see pro-lifers become more aware of the harmful impacts of vaccines, especially when it comes to the ethical side of things with fetal cell lines, what do you think needs to happen next for the pro-life movement to advocate for the change in the use of fetal cell lines? So do you see things shifting more by focusing on spreading awareness? Is it working with policymakers? Is it engaging directly with researchers, or maybe a combination of the three?
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, I feel like with this entire exposed series, every time we find a topic and we're like, wow, and I've been surprised by all three of our topics. I myself have been surprised when I really dig into the situation. And like when we put the IVF one out on in vitro fertilization, I feel like it was even a bit early in terms of even Christians being able to accept it. And they still haven't fully, right? Like, I feel like we're too early with all these things that we're doing. But I think that's the point of these videos, is to get it out there and get people thinking about it. And so I hope that now the researchers and the politicians and the everyday Christians, I hope that these things, like that they're motivated to look into it, figure things out, and then act in the area that they can act. For myself, I'm a very black and white person. That's just how I am. But so for myself, when they're like, here's this vaccine you have to take, I'm like, there's no way I am taking that, because it is against everything I believe in. And children were harvested alive for this. Like, no. And so, but I understand that a lot of people aren't as black and white. And, you know, I'm not super too much judging that, a little bit judging that, but I'm not here to like tell people what to do, right? I'm here to put the information out there, and then hopefully God uses it to convict people. And I don't know what that's going to look like within every realm, but I just hope that people are convicted and that they do what they can.
And do you know if there's a resource or list available that outlines which vaccines for children use embryonic stem cell lines?
There's a couple lists on different websites, but they conflict. I think, and so also every country is different, right? Like here in Canada, we'll use a different brand of this vaccine than they will in the States. And so what you can do is go to your doctor and say, I want to see the insert of the vaccine that you're about to put in my child or put into me. Mm-hmm. And you take that and you go and you look things up, and then you can find it. Now, honestly, it is very difficult now today to find someone who is willing to get you a vaccine that does not use the fetal cell lines, because they've moved fully into using them, and because they're packaging the vaccines together, like MMR, measles, mumps, rubella. So you want to, and at least one of those will have used the fetal cell lines. So it's very difficult. So this is what I've told people, because people have been messaging me from all over the world asking exactly that. And there is no master sheet, because it's different in every country, and just because of the way they're packaged. So yes, go in, ask your doctor, which is annoying, and they'll be annoyed with you. And a lot of times they'll say no, but you can still be like, I want it, give it to me. And then you take it home. It will take time. And a really good website, which is on our website, on this page that I've made for It's Okay, it's called Cellosaurus. And it's a medical thesaurus of all the different cell lines. And it was so helpful. When I stumbled, it was like one of the last I stumbled upon when I was putting together the sources, which I was like, where was this the whole time? I was looking for, but thank goodness everything matched up with everything that I had in the script. So I was really happy to find it. But it is a wealth of information with all different drugs, different vaccines. You can see the lines were used for it. So if you go on the It's Okay page on our website, and it'll say on our buttons under each child, like we have the Ellie section, and I think it says buy now. That will take you to the Cellosaurus website.
Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today and to talk about the latest Exposed series episode covering such an important topic. What can you tell us about the next episode of Exposed? Is it already in the works?
Yeah, it's in the works. I am wanting to do, so there's a couple ideas we have, which is great, and we will do them all eventually, but I think the next one is going to be on birth control, and that's what we're working on right now.
That is incredible, and I'm really excited to see it. I really appreciate this series because I think it's addressing topics that are often uncomfortable, especially in the pro-life movement. I know CLC, I mean, we take a very principled approach when it comes to ethical and unethical practices in healthcare, especially fetal cell lines, abortifacient contraception, that sort of thing. And so in a lot of ways, we're ridiculed for our very principled approach. But I think it's important to have these discussions because it's important to make informed choices, especially about our healthcare. And so I just really appreciate the work that you're doing on this series because it's very eye-opening and it's also very convicting for those who maybe aren't aware of these issues yet and they are pro-life. When we saw, with the IVF episode, a lot of people are personally impacted by that. And so it's something that's not talked about very often. And then same with this episode, fetal cell lines, also very impactful because it's something that most pro-lifers will come in contact with at some point. Because again, like just seeing what happened during COVID, you had to make this choice to get a vaccine. And a lot of people chose not to go through with it when they found out about the fetal cell lines, those who were pro-life. So I think these circumstances impact us all, and it's something we will likely encounter in our lives. So it's really important to be informed. And I just appreciate you making these really concise, clear, and also very, convicting, emotional videos to really portray the reality of the situation. So I thank you for that. And I also want to thank our viewers today, for everyone who's tuning in from home. We hope to see you at our next Life on Film screening presented by the March for Life in Canada. And for updates on our schedule of events, you can see our lineup of Life on Film screenings leading up to the March. You can visit marchforlife.ca for all of those updates. And to support the life-saving work of Choice42, be sure to also visit their website at choice42.ca. But thank you, everyone. Have a good night and God bless.